It's here. My February Sonnets Makers box is here. Just showed up on my doorstep a day early. So in the box, when you open it up, there's always a thank you card, and in it, it gives you the names of all the papers and the paint and a little bit of inspiration, along with a QR code that you can scan to watch some video that Sonnet made of all of the products that she puts in here. And then you open up the tissue paper. It's wrapped like a little present. It is so fun. Look, I'm shaking. Oh my goodness, look at that paper. So on top is recycled paper, recycled treasures paper, and this is exclusive to Sonnet's box. And I imagine that this is probably the masterboard. I'm not sure. I know that there's a masterboard. Look at that. Look at the musical notes. Oh, I can't wait to open this up. See what those are. Oh my God. Oh, she put an extra paper in. That's right. She gave us 3 of the recycled treasures exclusive papers this month. Look at that. Look at that beautiful butterfly. Colors are gorgeous. Okay, and here's Connie's papers. She painted these beautiful dragonflies. I love the purple behind it. I love the music notes. This is gonna be fun. And then the second paper that she did is Summer Cottage. That is sweet. Very, very nice. That'll be fun. And look, this is what CNC DIY Factory made as a thank you gift or an extra gift for everyone that has Sonnet's Maker's Box. This is a piece of wood that we cut on our laser and engraved. This is Amazing Grace. How sweet the sound. This is going to be fun to work with too. I love that. Okay, and then we have Sweet Pickens suitcase. Sweet Pickens milk paint in suitcase. And then we have Fusion in buttermilk cream. That's a nice pretty yellow. Look forward to using that. I don't have that one. And then we have Willow Bank. And then the DIY paints. It looks like it might be mint chip. I'll have to look on my card. Yep, mint chip. It's mint chip. And then we have petticoat pink. Very nice. So, this is the box. This is Sonnet's Maker's box. This is the February box. And I'm so excited to get started creating. Woo! For project 1, we're going to start with Spread Your Wings by the Painted Photographer. And this price paper, we're going to use the 2 smaller size images. We're going to start off with painting this block of wood that is about a 3.5 by 5 inch size with white chalk paint. And this is just Waverly and Snow White. And I'm going to paint both sides of this block. Once this is finished and dried, I'm going to take the French Millinery by DIY and I'm going to paint the edges of the block in this beautiful, I love this purple, it's beautiful. I'm using a water pen to cut out these dragonflies. I like the frayed edge around the rice paper, and I think it'll blend in really nicely with the wood block. You could use a regular paintbrush and water to get the same effect. And I'm going to go ahead and cut out both images with the water pen to give them both that frayed look. I use the DIY Crystal Clear Chandelier liquid patina for my decoupage medium, and I like to keep it in a little container so that I'm not dipping into the big one. So I'm going to go ahead and decoupage these dragonflies onto the wood block on both sides. Once I've decoupaged both sides of the block, and it's dried, I'm going to come in with a set of stamps that I've had for a very long time. And I'm going to use my IOD ink in black, and I'm going to stamp a different phrase on both sides of the block. One side is going to say, "With brave wings she flies," and the other side is going to say, "Believe anything is possible." DIY paint is an all-natural paint with no VOCs, and it is clay-based, so it does need to be sealed. And you can use any type of sealer that you want. You can use a varnish or a polyacrylic. I'm going to use the DIY clear wax to seal this, and then I'm going to come back over it with the dark wax to give it just a little bit of dimension, give some depth to the beautiful French millinery purple on the sides. And then this sweet little shelf sitter will be complete. In our second project today, we are going to be working with recycled decoupage paper, Spring Musical Notes. Now these papers are exclusive to Sonnet's Maker's Box each month. This month we were gifted with a second paper, so we have 2 papers of the Spring Musical Notes in this box, and you'll be seeing it later on in this video. But this paper is gorgeous. It has musical notes, it has beautiful pinks and yellows and stamps and all kinds of different ephemera on it. It's beautiful. I'm going to be using this beautiful paper on one of our wood faux books that we make here in our shop at CNC DIY Factory. This book can be found on our website at cncdiyfactory.com for purchase. So I'm going to start by measuring how much paper and where I want this paper to sit on the book. I'll be using the water pen to cut out the paper, but you don't need to use the water pen or a paintbrush and water on this one. You could use scissors if you'd like, because we will be sanding off the edges for a nice clean cut look. Before we decoupage, I'm going to apply a coat of white paint to the cover of this faux book. I'm using Waverly in Snow White. It's a chalk paint. You can use whatever white paint you'd like. When putting a coat of white paint down before you decoupage, this allows the paper and the colors in the paper to really pop. It keeps the background from coming through. Once I finished painting the white on the spine, the back, and the front of the book, and it has completely dried, I'm going to take the Buttermilk Cream by Fusion Mineral Paint that was in the maker's box, and I'm going to paint the edges of what would be the pages of the book. This yellow is beautiful, but it does seem to be out of place. It's a little bright, but you'll see later as we add layers to this book how the yellow plays in and adds to the beauty of the book. Once the paint has dried on the edges, I'm going to take my DIY liquid patina in Crystal Clear Chandelier, and I'm going to decoupage the Recycled Treasures paper to the spine and the back of the book. I line up the paper right where I want it, then I fold back an edge of it, and I add some liquid patina to the book as a starter strip. Then I'm going to spritz the paper so that it will release the fibers in the paper and allow me to smooth it out without wrinkles, and it'll help it to keep from being torn in the process. You'll see that by wetting the paper, it allows me to take my paintbrush and push that paper down into the spine, the curve of the spine in the book, and work it around the back of the book. Once the decoupage paper is dry, I'll take my finger sander and I will go at a 45-degree angle against the edge of the book and sand off all the excess paper to make a nice clean cut all the way around. To give this book some age and distress look, I'm going to take the IOD Vintage Texture stamp in the crackle, and I'm going to pair it up with the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide ink in Vintage Photo. I'm going to stamp this randomly all over the book. One of my favorite songs is How Great Thou Art. And in that song there is the line, "Then sings my soul." And every time I hear that, "Then sings my soul just soars. It's a beautiful song. I love it. I hear it in my head all the time. I felt that this would be perfect on this book. So I'm going to take my Essential stencil, and I'm going to use the color Willow Bank, and I'm going to stencil this onto the front of my book. We had talked about the yellow being a little too bright, so we're going to take this DIY liquid patina in Golden Ticket, and we're going to apply this over the yellow and tone it down just a little bit. Bring out a little bit of the beauty of the age look to the pages of the book. Once that liquid patina is dry, we are now going to bring some really beautiful age and depth to this book. We're going to be using Howard Chalk-Tique dark wax. I like this wax. It's very creamy, it's a nice brown, and it gives a beautiful aging effect to my projects. Once we've finished with the wax and we've wiped it all off, we're going to give this book a finishing touch with the Golden Rule by DIY. You'll see throughout this video that I love to work in layers. I add layer upon layer just to bring the depth and dimension and to create a beautiful project. For Project 3, we're going to be working with the Painted Photographer's Summer Cottage rice paper. I'm going to be using this on a surface that I found at the Dollar Tree. I'm going to be staining this surface with Minwax water-based stain that I get tinted at the paint counter at either Lowe's or Menards. This color is Legacy Brown. We're going to apply this to the board and then we're going to wipe it off. When working with a stain on a raw surface such as this, you'll want to keep a moist edge. So I start by misting the surface with my water mister. This allows the stain to flow smoothly across the surface. This Minwax water-based stain has no odors, it is safe to use inside, and it dries very, very quickly. Once the stain has dried, I'll do a light sanding over the surface just to take off that rough top. Whenever you add stain to a wood product, it's going to raise the grain of the stain. So you want to sand that down just slightly so it's smooth again. Now we're going to take the Summer Cottage and lay it on the surface, and we're going to measure where we are going to trim off the excess. I'm going to take my fingers and run it around the edge, and then my fingernail to create a crease in the paper. I'll be using my water pen to trim around the edge, but you can use a pair of scissors or a paintbrush with water. We will be sanding this back a little bit along the edge with our sander in order to get a nice clean edge. I'm going to decoupage this rice paper onto this surface, but I don't want the brown to show through. So I'm going to lay the paper back onto the surface where I want it, just to kind of get a measurement of where I want my white paint to stop. And then I'm going to lift up the edge and just mark at the bottom there where the white paint will end so that I can paint the surface underneath of the rice paper. I'm using Waverly Snow White chalk paint, but you can use any white paint that you like. I'll be using my DIY liquid patina and crystal clear chandelier to decoupage this rice paper down. It is my favorite decoupage medium. I'll be using it throughout this whole video. Now to add a little bit of dimension and layers to this project, I'm going to cast a mold using my Alumilite fast casting resin. It is a two-part resin, a part A and a part B, and they are equal amounts, 50-50, that you mix together and pour into the mold. I'll be using the IOD primitive mold today, and the mold that I want to use is that long frame or trim mold at the bottom there. I'll be casting several of those. When using this particular resin, you'll want to mix equal amounts of part A and part B. You'll have about 30 seconds to mix it and then another minute or so to get it poured into the mold before it starts to set. You have about a 2-minute window before it really starts setting. And then after 10 minutes, it should be ready to demold. You'll see that I have a couple of these trim pieces already cast. This one that I'm pulling out of the mold now, I'm pulling it out a little early so that it is still malleable. I can still move it around and trim it up as I need. If you let it set for too long, it hardens to the point where you cannot move it or cut it. Once I have these cut to the length that I want, I'm going to take the mint chip DIY paint that came in Sonnet's Maker's Box, and I'm going to paint this trim piece. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to take my Stick Fast in thick and I'm going to apply it to the back of these mold castings and adhere it to my piece. The first thing I thought of when I saw the Painted Photographer's Summer Cottage rice paper was a song by John Cougar Mellencamp called Pink Houses, and I really like that song, and so I thought it would be fitting if I took the Apothecary Labels stamp from IOD and spelled out the words Little Pink Houses for You and Me. I'm going to be using the Petticoat Pink by DIY Paint and my brayer to apply the paint to the back of the stamps, and I'm going to stamp this onto my project. I happen to have 2 sets of these apothecary labels so that I would have multiple letters to use, but with this phrase I need to adjust some of the letters to reuse them. I need to reuse the E and the O, so you'll see me taking off the other letters and reusing the E and the O. we used both the mint chip and the petticoat pink in DIY paint in this project. And the DIY paint needs to be sealed. So I'm going to take the DIY clear wax and I'm going to seal this entire project. For project number 4, we are going to be using Roy Cycles paper, the Vintage Botanical Masterboard. This paper is gorgeous. It has so many different little elements to it. I'm going to be working with a thrifted frame that I had in my stash. But first I need to take that raised stencil off of there. So I'm going to give this a quick sand and brush it off and it'll be ready to go. Now that I've selected what area of the masterboard I want to use on this piece, I'm going to take an essential stencil, window pane stencil, and kind of mark out and cut out the piece of rice paper or decoupage paper that I want to use on this piece. My vision for this piece was a window frame with flowers in it. So we're going to go ahead and paint the wall, and we're going to use the Willowbank Fusion Mineral Paint. I'm going to put 2 coats of this beautiful blue paint on the surface of this piece. Because we just painted that entire surface blue and I don't want it to show through my decoupage paper, I'm going to take the Waverly chalk paint in Snow White and I'm going to paint the back of this decoupage paper so that the blue does not come through. After the white paint has dried, I'm going to place it just where I want it on the board, and then I'm going to decoupage it down using my DIY liquid patina in Crystal Clear Chandelier, which is my favorite decoupage medium. Once I've finished decoupaging this down, I'm going to take that window stencil from Essential Stencil and I'm going to stencil using the casement from Fusion Mineral Paint. I'm going to stencil the window pane around and over top of the decoupage paper to create a window. Music has a unique ability to evoke feelings of joy by tapping into our emotions and memories. It's like a universal language that resonates with our inner feelings and brings a smile to our face. The band Lone Star has a song called My Front Porch Looking In, and that song does exactly that for me. It evokes a smile, brings us a memory and a good feeling of joy. So I'm going to stencil "The view I love the most is my front porch looking in," quote, by Lone Star on this piece. So at this point, I felt this piece was beautiful, but it was a little one-dimensional. I wanted it to have a little more dimension, a little more layers to it. And so I decided I would take my Liquitex modeling paste and mix it with 3 different colors of paint. I'm using the Fusion paint. I'm using the Willowbank in the blue. I'm using the Algonquin, which is a tan, and I'm using the casement, which is the off-white. And I'm going to create 3 different colors of paste. And I'm going to use this to stencil a brick pattern all around the window pane and the quote that I've already stenciled onto the surface. I cut out a piece of thick cardstock to cover the window pane, and then I'm laying down my brick stencil. I'm going to take all 3 colors of the paste that I just created, and I'm going to put it randomly around the stencil, and then take my palette knife and smear it across the top and smooth it out and give it some dimension and texture. Using 3 different colors creates visual interest and more realistic look to the brick. While the brick was drying, I cast several more of the primitive molds trim to go around the window casing. I figured since the brick was dimensional, the window needed to have some dimension as well. And I will paint these trim pieces with the casement from Fusion Mineral Paint. I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick to adhere the trim pieces to my window casing. To seal everything in, I'm going to use DIY clear wax to go over the entire surface, wipe back the excess, and then I'm going to come back in with the DIY dark wax to give it some depth and dimension, to bring out the grooves in all of the brick and the trim pieces, and just to finish this off nicely. So for this last project, project number 5, we have 2 items that are still haven't used. One is the Sweet Pickens Milk Paint and Suitcase, and the other is our CNC DIY Factory Amazing Grace How Sweet the Sound piece. Now, you don't have to craft with this. This is great if you want to lean it up against your wall or your shelf, or put it in a tiered tray. You don't have to do anything at all with this. This is great. And I got Sonnet's vision. I understood what she wanted and was able to create it. But I want to do something a little bit more. And I couldn't figure out what she was going to do with it, and thought, okay, I need to figure out what I would do with it. What would I do with this? How can I showcase this? And so I thought about it for quite a while, and I thought, okay, well, what does Amazing Grace mean to me? It's one of my favorite songs, absolutely favorite songs. I have it all over my house, actually. I have a picture up on my wall. I have it on my Bible, my scriptures, everything. It's just, what would I do with this piece? And I thought, well, first time I heard it, I was in church. And that made me think of stained glass and cathedral windows. So I went to my laser and I created a cathedral window. It's 2 pieces. And the thing that I wanted to do was I wanted this to set down inside of my window. So this is what we're going to work on for the fifth and final project. Now I have other ideas. I might show clips of them later at the end of the video, but this is the last project we're going to work on together. So let's see how this comes out. We're going to start off using the milk paint, the Sweet Pickins milk paint in Suitcase. We're going to take just a half a tablespoon approximately and mix it into this paper cup along with some warm water and stir it up. And then I'm going to set it aside for about 10 minutes while I continue on to the rest of this project. I'm using Fusion Mineral paint in Highlander, and I'm going to paint the entire top of this cathedral window with one coat. Once that Highlander was dry, I'm going to take my brick stencil and lay it over my cathedral window, and then I'm going to stencil using the milk paint in Suitcase. I've never stenciled with the milk paint before, so this is the first time I've used it in this manner, but I think it'll work out just fine. And I'm going to do 2 coats of the milk paint, drying it between each coat. And I have to remind myself to trust the process. After the milk paint dries, and it does have some good crackle to it, I'm going to take the buttermilk cream by Fusion, and I'm going to do a real light dry brush over the top of this. The red and the brown are too dark. I need to bring in some light tones to this. As I was working on this, I had a different paper in mind for the background, but it just didn't feel right. So I went back to the Spring Musical Notes by Roy Cycled, and I found the perfect section to use. I chose not to paint the back white this time. I want that wood or that dark tone to show through. I'm using my favorite decoupage medium, the DIY Liquid Patina Crystal Clear Chandelier, to decoupage this paper to the back of the cathedral window. So a cathedral window has stained glass in it, but this paper didn't have a stained glass effect, so I created my own. I'm using this cross that came in this box set that I bought on clearance somewhere, probably Hobby Lobby, a couple years ago. And it's silver, and I don't want silver, so we're going to work with it and try to make it a little more fitting. For these 2 pieces, we're going to be using the DIY products, the Golden Rule Wax and the Liquid Patina Golden Ticket. Remember when I mentioned that I had to tell myself to trust the process? Well, this is where that comes in. I was not happy with the top of that cathedral window. It wasn't the colors that I was thinking. It was getting close, but it was not quite there. So I took the Olden Gray Liquid Patina from DIY and I went over the top of that. And then I'm going to go back over that once that dries with a Dixie Belle Best Dang Wax in Grunge Gray. And then I'm still not happy with it, so I pulled out my Sweet Pickins Grit, and this is like a powder, and I'm going to use this to incorporate into the Best Dang Grunge Gray wax. This is going to give me the effect of that window that I have been wanting. So for this cross, I'm going to use some products from back in the day when I used to make jewelry. I'm going to use some jewelry, wire, and some beads, and I'm going to create a hanger for the cross to attach to the cathedral window. Now to put this all together. The cross, I had tied little knots into the bead wire, the jewelry wire, and I stapled it to the back of the cathedral window. I'm going to use some E6000 and apply it all around the underside of the top of the cathedral window and clamp it down to the base and let it dry for a couple of hours to make sure it is secure. I did not record attaching the Amazing Grace piece to this cathedral window. You'll have to stay to the end to see how it turns out.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed.